This is supposed to be the latest and greatest solar panel on the market. Today, we're going to review it, we're going to rate it, and we're also going to give you a sneak peek into a little real world test that we're running to break it. Now, if you are about to buy solar or you're considering it for your home, then you cannot miss this video. So what is this new mystery panel? Well, it's got a name that you simply will not forget. It is the Longi Himo X10 485 Eco-Life solar panel with HPBC 2.0 cell tech. Sort of feels like Sony's got a new competitor in town when it comes to product naming conventions. Now, according to Longi, this model is specifically designed to outperform traditional solar panels, especially in like real world conditions with better efficiency, better performance under shading, and better long-term output, and ultimately offering better value for money. Now, at first glance, the datasheet looks like any other. The headline specs are as follows. Power ranges, they start at 475 and go right through to 500 watt. Now, right now in 2026, physical stock of the 480 is available to the general public, but the 485s are available, and you'll see how you can get your hands on them later in the video. Size of the panel, they are a little taller than a standard module, coming in at 1800 by 1134. By comparison, a standard module is going to be about 34 millimeters shorter. Efficiency, this peaks out at 24.5 for the 500 watt version, and this is how much of the light hits the panel that can actually be converted into energy. Temperature coefficient is 0.20% for every 1 degree Celsius. Essentially, the way this works, the hotter a panel actually gets, the worse it performs. So for every 1 degree above 25 degrees, which is the standard test condition, this only drops 0.20%, which is about 30% better than most. Cell degradation, 0.35% per year, guaranteed for 30 years. And this is how much power it loses over time. Not a lot. I mean, these are organic products, so they do reduce, but this Longi, not by much. And lastly, warranty. This is 30 years for the physical product and 30 years for its performance. So essentially, these panels will be around way beyond the average payback period, meaning you'll get plenty of time to generate nothing but profit. But datasheets don't really explain where this extra performance is coming from, but we have that information for you guys here today. Now, before we get into this tech, it is worth addressing something up front. If you've followed us for a while, you'll know that we've historically only installed REA panels. Now, that hasn't changed because REA have suddenly become a bad product. Literally far from it. You couldn't get further from the truth. What has actually happened is there has been a shift in direction. REA have made a decision to pause development on the traditional silicon wafer technology and focus heavily on perovskite, that's how you say it, which they believe is the next big breakthrough in solar, and they might be right. But it leaves a gap in the current market, which is rapidly chasing these headline power figures, and that's where Longi come in. Now, what really sets this panel apart from the mass market is this advanced cell architecture, aptly named HPBC 2.0, which means Hybrid Passive Back Contact version 2. Again, Sony, you better watch yourself. I just realized there's something else on this thing. It's actually called the HPBC 2.8 Ti-Ray. Sony, you've had it. The aim here is to provide maximum performance irrespective of what condition it's subject to. Solar panels are made up of a bunch of different solar cells. Now, traditionally on a residential panel, there'll be 54 of them, and they need to be wired together in order to produce enough power. Now, like 95% of the market wires these cells up on the front, so the wires run down the front of the panel, and they use the smallest gauge wire possible because what they don't want to do is block anything hitting that cell. It's like having bars on your windows. Now, the other reason they do it this way is because it's cheap and it's easy. Longi, however, they've got the experience and the technical know-how to move all of this wiring to the back of the panel. Now, these wires on the front of a normal panel are literally so tiny. Is it really worth it? Well, in isolation, No. Wiring on a rear contact unlocks about 2% more efficiency, but now we're not challenged with blocking the cells, so we can afford to make these connections way more complex and make every single cell independent. We can wire it in a way that they're not connected together. Yes, they are to add up to a total power figure, but they can all work on their own. Now I can hear you already. Eco already do this, they're already doing this whole rear contact thing, which they are, and Longi now do it too, but there are differences between the two panels, and if you hang around till the end of the video, we're gonna have a comparison to run you through how they are similar but different. Okay, let's take a look at how this actually works, and I've got something that's gonna make life a little bit easier. Please do ignore all of this on the table. That's just what we need to get through one of these videos. Right, what do we have here? Well, this is actually a part of a rig that we originally saw back out in Intersolar in Germany when we first started speaking to Longi. And it's essentially a mini version of these solar panels, these cells, against a standard panel. And there's a test we can conduct. Now, they used this on us to sort of convince us this was the best technology in the world. We're gonna try and recreate it today. Let's see how we get on. Right, this is a sample of the Longi panel with those super duper cells in there. And then we've got a standard panel in here. Okay, both panels are sort of set up and I've put the little cable in the back. Now, the way this works is we take one of these lights, I think one of these is broke, I have to be careful, and we plug it in, aha, and it's producing energy because we've got a light in, can you see that? We've got a light in the studio, so the panel's producing energy and the little LED is on, and then we can connect the standard panel. That was the broke one. I broke that. I've also broke that one.
Don't break the third one, please.
I won't break the third one. It's on. So they're both working, they're both the same brightness, and then what we're gonna do is we're gonna block certain sections of the panel off and see what happens to the light. Now with the Longi, in theory, when we block it off, it shouldn't drop as much as it does on the standard panel. Perfect. It's gone out! It's gone out! Okay, so we've had to turn up the sun to get more light on the panel. Now, Liam's telling me that these are currently on. And what we're gonna do is introduce some blockage to the panel. Now, if this was a full panel, this thing's gonna cover most of the panel, it's obviously gonna knock it out. But with the Longi, we are pretty much covering the entire panel.
Yeah, it's on, it's still on.
It's still on?
Yeah.
What? Right, okay. Now if we block this panel.
Fully off.
Fully off.
Fully off. Fully off. Fully off. Fully off. Fully off. Back on. That's pretty cool.
So they're both covered, one is on and one is off. But how is this actually happening? Because most of this cell or this panel is covered over. Well, the way it works is on this panel and on most panels on the market, all of the connections are done on the front, and we need to keep those connections to a minimum because the more we put on, the more it blocks. But the downside of doing that is we have to have simple wiring configurations. So they're wired in series. Like Christmas tree lights, if one's dim, they're all dim. If one's off, they're all off. And it's the same on a DC solar system. So typically on your roof, if you have a DC system, you might have 10 panels. They'll all be wired together, and if one goes dim, they all go dim. Now, the way the Longi works is totally different. All of the connections are on the back of the panel, and every single cell is individually wired to its neighbor, and it can also operate within itself, if you like. So what's happening here is it's taking this surface area around the side and adding it all together to produce power. What's happening on this one is one part of the surface area is covered, so the whole panel has given up. So where this really comes in is on those DC systems, you're not going to be affected by shading anywhere near what you would have with a standard panel. Now, Longi claim that it's something like 70% shade optimization. A standard panel is in two halves. So they have one big panel is in two sections. So if half of it's covered, the other half will still produce energy. With the Longi panel, you can cover pretty much 80% of the panel and still produce energy. That's what we're doing here. So the technology does work, but this is ultimately a Longi marketing box. It's designed for a purpose, an outcome. They want to prove that these standard panels don't work when they're partially shaded, and their Longi one does. And we were mega impressed by it when we first saw it, but we didn't want to just take their word for it. So we're gonna test it ourselves. We put together our own rig in the garden with not just like a cheap panel that comes in this marketing box, but a good panel and the same power as the Longi panel, 480 watt. And we put them on this frame, we put them side by side, and we're gonna run a massive test, subjecting them to different conditions, shading, rain, weather, maybe like a durability test, anything that we can throw at these panels to see, does this Longi really come out on top in the real world? Like outside, not in a lab. This is going to be a super interesting video comparison, and you definitely don't want to miss it. Now is a great time to hit that subscribe button so you won't. We spent a huge amount of time looking for alternative panels. We went to go and see manufacturers, we went to trade shows, we even went to China to go and see some of these brands. And what we were looking for is the next best thing that we could offer to the market. And when we were introduced to Longi, we were not only impressed with the product, but also the company, because these guys own the entire end-to-end process of producing solar panels.
So we are in charge of module cell wafer up to ingot level. We manufacture in-house up to ingot level, and we have 4 major polysilicon mining factories that our polysilicon come from.
Longi have that entire process wrapped up, and they also supply their product to some of the biggest names in the industry.
Eco also buy wafers from us, but they manufacture their own modules themselves.
So those cells that are in the Eco panels, or the solar wafers, come from Longi. They actually supply them to produce their product. They just have a huge dominance. Now, when we got down to our final choices, it was ultimately between 2 panels. We had the Longi and we had the Eco. Both have the rear contact technology, both have high efficiency, but there were a few things that sort of pushed us more towards the Longi camp. Just the fact they have this whole end-to-end process and they are supplying these other manufacturers was a big win for us. If you want a Greggs sausage roll, you go to Greggs. You don't go to Iceland, get a frozen one and cook it yourself. And that's essentially what some of these other manufacturers are doing with their solar panels. That was a strange analogy that was injected by Liam. I'm not sure it lands. The other benefit of owning the entire process is that you can be audited at every step of the way and make sure that your ESG credentials actually stack. There's nowhere to hide for a manufacturer because they are responsible from A to Z when it comes to producing solar panels. They had hundreds of awards that they wanted to show us. We didn't really know what they meant, but we saw lots of golds and lots of A stars. So those points were really important to the leadership team here at Heatable. But for customers, they're also looking for high performance out of their product. Well, that Longi impressed us, and we've seen today that rear contact technology does make a difference and it keeps your panels producing. But Eco also have this technology in their panels too. And earlier on, I promised you a comparison. Let's run through it now and see the differences between these 2 flagship solar panels. Both panels manage shading in a very similar way with this rear contact. Now, when it comes to max power, the Longi has a 500 watt rating in its current range, and the Eco has a 495. When it comes to laying up the solar cells in the panel, these 2 companies do it differently. Longi leave a tiny gap between each cell, and Eco pretty much overlap them. Well, they actually touch in, but they overlap a tiny amount. Now, the reason Eco do this is it gives them maximum efficiency over a surface area. It's actually why the Eco panel is slightly smaller than the Longi, but reaches a similar efficiency. Efficiency on both panels is pretty much identical at 24.5%. However, Longi pulls this back when it comes to that temperature coefficient, 0.20. With the Eco, it is 0.22%. So not a huge difference, but it does add up over a year. When it comes to the warranty, the Eco panel comes with a 25-year warranty for the product and a 30-year warranty for performance. With the Longi, you get 30 years and 30 years. And finally, we have got the price. So the Longi is actually a little bit cheaper. It comes in about £8 cheaper than the current Eco panel, which retails for about £97 for the 475 watt version. This is a great time to point out that neither panel is leaps ahead of each other here. I mean, the Longi has a better temperature performance, a higher cell performance, and a 20% longer warranty, but that Eco is smaller, it's lighter, and it has a bit of an edge when it comes to that peak efficiency over the same surface area. Now, if you like the sound of this Longi panel and you want the maximum power for your solar system, then I've got some good news for you, because right now we have just secured 8 weeks worth of stock of the 485 watt version of this module, and it's the same price as the readily available 480. Now, if you want my advice here and you want a quote for solar, head over to the Heatable website. You can see online prices, you can look at different battery options, you can see these Longi panels, and you can book a free design call. Now, earlier on, I mentioned that we went to China to go and check out some of these factories. Well, that video is on screen for you right here. And if you want to see that panel get put through its paces, tested in real world conditions, and to make sure that that isn't a box of tricks, then make sure you are subscribed to the channel, because if you are, you won't miss that video.